I like to think of beautiful men and beautiful women. Men are more like the sun, right? They're kind of like same every day, right? They repeat, the hormones come up, they come down, and then same the next day. Women do have diurnal rhythms. We have circadian rhythms as well, but we also have this lunar. We also, like, men are like the sun, women are like the moon. We have, and actually our menstrual cycle, I didn't mention this before, 29 and a half days is the average menstrual cycle. How long do you think the lunar phase is? 29 and a half days. Women are like the moon, right? Raise your hand if you absolutely love and look forward to your period. All right. Raise your hand if you are concerned about or worried by perimenopause or menopause. Just have a look around. Keep the hands up. Yeah. What if I were to tell you that I can show you how to have a pain-free period and set you up for an easy perimenopausal transition? We into that? Okay, good. Whew. All right. In the next 30 minutes, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking to you about your fitness and training and how we can sync that with your cycle, your nutrition, the foods that you should be eating and maybe ones that you can avoid, and strategies to sync with your cycle, and stress management so that you can all menstruate like a goddess. Yeah. This is not going to be your mother's menopause. All right. Why you should listen to me, just a little street cred. That was a wonderful introduction, Angela. Thank you. But this is my first year speaking at Health Optimization Summit, and you've all been so warm and welcoming. I spent 19 years in private practice, seeing both men and women. And in that time, of course, patterns do emerge. I wrote a book, as Angela mentioned, it's called The Betty Body. It's here, actually, at the summit, and I'll be signing books tomorrow. That sold tens of thousands of copies. It was number one in the UK in several categories. I'm very proud of that, as well as in Canada and the United States. And I've also taught other physicians. So I've had people run through my nutrition programs, and I've also helped other physicians, many different disciplines, MDs, DCs, DOs, NDs, all the letters, the alphabet soup, how they can also structure female-centric programs, because it's not really done. It's not very common. Okay, so let's start with the obvious. My presentation is over. That's it. No. We love our men, right? So can we just give a round of applause to all the men that are in here today? Yes. All right. Awesome. Because this presentation and this subject matter is for women and the men who love them. And our beautiful men, we are just far more complex than our men. And there are actually many ways in which we see sexual dimorphisms, which we're not going to get into today, but there are organs that behave differently, brain parts that behave differently. We're going to focus today on the reproductive system, because that is the most obvious way in which we are distinct, right? And if you don't have reverence for the female body, let me just remind you that for about 40 years, every single month, women create a new organ. Every single month. That is the endometrial lining, in anticipation of a fertilized egg, whether or not you want to get pregnant. But that is what the female body is capable of. And I am always in awe and reverence for the female body. And that's where I'd love to be able to start today. And so the big take-home point, we're going to start with the big idea and then work backwards. We are not just little men. We're not just little men with pesky hormones. And the problem, of course, is that we've been lied to as women, right? We've been told you got to do the same cardio all month long, the same diet all month long, the same training all month long. And what happens when we fall off? What do women do? Do we say, wow, that program really wasn't designed for a female body? We say, no, what's wrong with me? Right? Why can't I just freaking follow through on something? Why can't I just follow through on the diet and change the body composition and do the things that I want? We blame ourselves. And the reason why these programs don't work is because they're not designed for women. They are, unfortunately, many programs, women will fail on them. And in the spirit of sharing and transparency and honesty, I used to behave like this. I used to behave like I was a small man with pesky hormones. I hated my menstrual cycle. I thought it was a curse. I had one good week out of the month, and that was the week that my period finished, right? The week that my period finished, I felt great. The 2 weeks after that, it was, GI distress and tender breasts and achy joints and moodiness and sleeplessness and all the things. And then once I did get my period, I was on medication because the dysmenorrhea, or the cramping that happens when the uterus is contracting to expel the uterine lining, was so bad that I wasn't able to actually participate in my activities of daily living. So I was on these little blue pills called Anaprox. I don't know if they have them here, but so I want to make sure that by the end of this session, you have some actionable strategies on how to deal with the ever-changing hormonal landscape that is your menstrual cycle. And just to give you a little bit, just to tell you a little bit more about my story, this is how I spent most of my, that's actually how, this is, I'm wearing something similar to it now, the updated version of it, but how I actually paid for my professional education was I was a step instructor. Hands up who remembers step. 3 knee repeaters, anyone? Yeah, okay. That was me. And I also did high impact aerobics, low impact aerobics, Taibo. I don't know if Taibo was here, but like boxing classes. That was me. Actually, it's how I paid for my education. I would wake up at 4 a.m. and I had convinced one gym to give me 3 back-to-back sessions, 3 cardio sessions in the morning. So I did the 5 a.m., the 6 a.m., the 7 a.m. I was done at 8, and then I hustled my way to school. I was in school for the day, and then another gym at a different location. I went to and I taught a step or a high-low or a boxing at 5:30, 6:30, and 7:30 in the evening. So that's 6 hours of cardio. And then, of course, I have homework and I have to do studies and I have anatomy lab and all the things. So I would go home and study after that late into the night. And I did that for many years. My period was a gong show. Like I said, one good week out of the month. And like most problems, when you ignore them for a long enough time, what happens? They blow up in your face. And I tried to ignore my period, and then 2016 happened. Divorce. I was married at the time. I've remarried, so my husband is here in the audience. But my marriage at the time was breaking up, and honestly, it was anyone who's ever been through a breakup, who's ever been through a divorce or a separation, you know how excruciatingly painful this is. The dreams that I had with this man were broken into a million pieces. And the 50th wedding anniversary that I had dreamed I was going to have with him was no longer. And it wasn't just that I was breaking up with a man. There were also my beautiful children that I had to consider as well. And if any of you follow me online, you know that I never post pictures of my kids. I'll usually, if they are in a photo, I put a big white or a big heart around their face. But I do feel quite safe here. So these are my children, Andreas and Sebastian. And again, with the divorce, I had to contend with the idea that I was breaking their hearts as well, right? So they didn't ask for that. And thank you. Thank you. And so as I have now new financial bills with the lawyers, and I'm trying to deal with why my babies are asking me why mommy and daddy are not living in the same house, 2016 was not quite finished with me yet. My clinic also burned down 3 weeks after I asked my husband for separation. This is actually a picture of my clinic. It was a 2-level clinic. We called it the Health Loft, and there was the massage therapist at the end of the night. She was putting in her load of laundry in the dryer, and she wasn't there when nobody was in the clinic when the fire happened. But something happened with the dryer. Like electrical fire, it exploded. I don't know if you can see it from this photo, but there's no windows at the top because all the glass is on the ground. And so now my family is breaking up, and I have no place to practice. I have no place to work and to pay for the mounting bills that I have. And so what do you think a type A super driven personality did? Did she say, I need a vacation? No, she white knuckled her way through it, right? Because I'm a small man with pesky hormones, right? If they men get divorced all the time. Like I got bills to pay. I got to do it. And I tried for months and months and months, just white knuckling my way through it until one day my office manager was like, you know what? Just leave. You need a vacation. You're useful to nobody. I was like, I thank God for my patients who were so understanding at that time. And so in the summertime, that's exactly what I did. I took my kids and we went to Italy. We were there for 3 weeks because when you're in North America, Italy is very far away. So you have to go for a long time. And this trip, I'm sharing this with you because this trip changed my life. It's actually the reason why the Betty Body book was born. I was in the sunshine. I was in the salty Tyrrhenian Sea. I was walking after meals. I was sleeping. And on this trip, towards the end of the trip, I got my period. And normally I would have a 2-week leeway. I would have a 2-week warning bells that it's coming because I would have achy joints and angry breasts and brain fog and moodiness and sleep disturbances and all the things. And I didn't even know it was coming. It just came. It was glorious. I was a goddess. I felt clean, right? I felt like I was cleaning house. And I knew in that moment, even though everything's better in Europe, right? Everything's better in Italy, right? I knew that my North American body, I could take this body back home and I could continue to do this at home in Toronto. And that's what I did. We were running nutrition programs at the time in our temporary little, pseudo clinic where I was seeing patients temporarily while I was trying to get another lease up and running from the fire. And this is where my body of work was born. And so we're going to get into it now. How many of you have seen a chart like this? Just hands up, show me. Yeah, lots of you. Okay, good. So the ones that didn't raise your hands, if you haven't seen a chart like this, I promise this will be quick and painless. Okay. So we are looking at the menstrual cycle. And when I say menstrual cycle, I'm not talking just about your period. I'm talking about the totality of the cycle. So this is, for most, the average sort of cycle length is somewhere between 26 and 34 days. All charts are 28. I don't know why, but if you're not 28, you're not abnormal. It's totally normal for you to have a 29 or 30 or 31 day cycle. Okay. Menstrual cycle is generally divided into 2 different parts: follicular, if you're looking at me this way, and luteal. In the follicular phase, bleed week. Everyone knows when they're bleeding, right? Shark Week, everyone knows that it's there, right? Day 1, that was my silly joke, attempt at humor. Day 1 is, and I have Amy here to laugh at my joke so no one else does. Day 1 of your cycle is the first day of your bleed, okay? Average bleed for women, 3 to 7 days. Okay. And we can talk about quality and quantity and color of the blood. We can talk all about that as well. And then the second week is called the proliferative phase. And this is where we are working on developing the follicle. One special follicle that has been chosen above the rest to develop and eventually release the egg, which is ovulation, which, by the way, my friends, is the point of your cycle. It's not to bleed. I know that the bleed everyone gets all the attention. It's the popular girl at the party, but it is ovulation, which is the main point of your cycle. There are 2 hormones in the follicular phase that I want to bring your attention to. One is in pink and the other one's not on this chart. So the one in pink is estrogen. She is an anabolic hormone, and she's a she, of course. So she is an anabolic hormone. She peaks late in the follicular phase. Okay. She's involved in that development of the follicle. And she's going to be important when we talk about muscle in just a moment. The other hormone, can anybody guess the other hormone that I might be talking about? You could just, A+ on your charts. Very good. Testosterone. Testosterone also peaks at about the same time as estrogen. Also an anabolic hormone. Famous for libido, right? Famous for muscle mass. And it's very interestingly, not a lot of people know this, but I suspect this front row might, that testosterone is the most abundant sex hormone in the female body. Yeah. So typically, we phenotypically ascribe estrogen as the dominant sex hormone. It's actually testosterone. And this becomes important in perimenopause as well. Luteal phase initiates with ovulation, the main point of your cycle. Another green hormone is the one I would like to direct your attention to there. It's called progesterone. You will not release progesterone unless you ovulate. Ovulation is a requirement for progesterone to show up. She's a little bit finicky. Okay. Progesterone has many functions in the body, helps you sleep. So she helps with quelling anxiety. This becomes important in perimenopause when progesterone begins to drop. She is warming. So if you wear a wearable like a ring or a Fitbit or something like that, or a Whoop, you'll notice that around ovulation and then right before you bleed, you're going to be warmer. Your basal body temperature is going to be elevated. Slows down your digestion, right? So you may have more GI distress during the second half of the cycle. And the other important thing that I want to talk about with progesterone is she likes to bring in her uterus ninjas and just beat the crap out of estrogen. Okay. Do we see another pink line in the luteal phase? Yes. So estrogen comes back for seconds, but the reason why it's not as high as it was in the follicular phase is because of progesterone. She downregulates, so progesterone will downregulate the estrogen receptors. So as the receptors are waiting for estrogen, she's going to say, like, you can be a little less sensitive. Like if estrogen passes by, like, don't be desperate. Just like, calm down a little bit. And through positive feedback loops in the brain, she will also downregulate total estrogen production. Most women experience PMS or some issue with their cycle in the second half of the cycle, the luteal phase. So you're not overreacting. It's your ovaries that are acting, right? And I want to give you some action items today in terms of how you might improve some of those inflammatory tendencies in the luteal phase of the cycle. So let's begin. Let's talk about muscle. We cannot have a conversation about cycle optimization if we are not talking about muscle. If you're taking notes, this is where you can write them on your phone or if you have some paper. Muscle starts with M and it has 3 actions on the body that also start with M. So they're easy to remember. The first is mobility. Right? We all are able to move around because of our muscles and our bones. Muscles and bones, sisters, right? When one is up, the other one is up. So we have more muscle tissue, we have better bone density, and the opposite is also true. As we lose muscle mass, as we age, if we're not being strategic, we will also lose bone density. And this may not be important for you now if you're in your 20s or 30s or 40s or even your 50s, but I promise you in your 60s, your 70s, your 80s, mobility becomes a challenge if you're not being strategic about it. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control in the States, last year reported 300,000 hip fractures that required hospitalization. 95% of that number, they were from falls. So falling on ice, if you live in a place that's icy, tripping on a carpet, tripping on your grandson's Lego. Hip fractures. And I should say also of that 300,000, 3/4 of those individuals were female. So osteoporosis, right? Like fragility in the bone is very, very important. So that's mobility. Muscle serves a mobility function. The second is metabolic. Okay. Muscle is the primary site for insulin activity. Insulin, when you are contracting your muscle, insulin is going to come up. The insulin receptor is going to come up from inside the myocyte or the muscle cell, and it's going to express itself on the cell surface of the muscle. And that's going to allow insulin to bind if you've had some carbohydrates or something like that and you have insulin floating around. And then that's going to open up the glucose channels and allow glucose to be drained from the blood and into the myocyte. Where will be, for my nerds here, it's going to be phosphorylated, so it stays in the muscle. Once the glucose gets into the muscle, it stays there. It's like Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. The other thing actually on the metabolic front is women in perimenopause. If you are noticing that your labs are starting to go down the drain and you have no idea why, because you're doing the exact same thing that you were when you were 35, it's because you're losing muscle mass. It is also helping with your blood lipid regulation. So if you're seeing on your labs things like elevated glucose and insulin, like we just talked about, but also things like elevated triglycerides, total cholesterol, LDL-C, LDL particle number, this is all facilitated through muscle. Okay, so mobility, metabolic function, and then menstrual. Every time you are training, you will have a transient rise in our favorite hormone, the most dominant hormone, which is what? Ladies in the front, testosterone, right? And depending on how fit you are, that will last anywhere from 10 to 48 hours. The other thing that it does in terms of menstrual function is it promotes a healthy progesterone to estrogen balance in that luteal phase of the cycle when a lot of women are going to feel more inflamed, more agitated. Okay. The last thing I'll say on muscle, which is honestly, it's a talk unto itself. So if this is something that you'd like me to geek out on another time, I would love it. The way that women train is different than the way that men train, right? We need to have female-centric protocols for training women. And when we think about the best areas of the body that we want to be putting on muscle on a woman, we want to be thinking about the top. So we want to think about an hourglass. So the top, nice broad shoulders and back, coming into a small waist, and then a flare out in the hip. It looks good, right? So there's like an aesthetic benefit to an hourglass figure. But so beyond the aesthetics, this confers a longevity benefit, right? So when we have a smaller waist to hip ratio, and I'll tell you what that is in a moment, this is going to help with or decrease your risk for cardiovascular disease. The number one killer for women, by the way, it's not breast cancer, it's CVD, cerebrovascular disease, so stroke, and metabolic diseases like type 2 diabetes and Alzheimer's. What is a waist to hip ratio? You don't need expensive equipment. You need a tape measure. If you don't have a tape measure, I'm sure there's a local Boots, couple quid, as y'all call it, right? You go get, a couple quid and you're going to take the thinnest part of your waist. If you have had babies, that's not your belly button anymore, right? So thinnest part of your waist, widest part of your hips, you divide those numbers into each other. The number that you should get is somewhere between 0.7 and 0.8. Said another way, your waist should be about 70 to 80% of the width of your hips. This is a conversation about visceral fat, but this is something that I'm very passionate about in terms of how we can delay and even reverse some of these issues that we're seeing in our beautiful women who are perimenopausal and menopausal. Okay, let's get into the cycles. Let's get into week 1. Or leg day, am I right? Right? At least leg day for me. It looks like a murder scene. So this is Cardi B, popular girl. She gets to go to, the Met Gala or whatever this thing is. As I mentioned, a regular or typical bleed week for most women, 3 to 7 days. The color of your blood will start off being a bright ruby red, and it ends up sort of being an oxidated, more of a brown color. And it should go from heavy in the beginning to lighter as the week goes on. In terms of muscle, we were just spending a little bit of time on muscle. How do we train in week 1? Some women, first day or two, like I was for many years, high levels of prostaglandins, on medication because of the dysmenorrhea or the painful period cramps. If you're not into weight training on the first couple of days, go for long walks, that beautiful rocking motion in the sacrum that happens when you're walking. But what heavy is and how we train is going to change week over week over week. So it's always heavy. And what I mean by heavy is like you and I might go to the gym and what you might lift something that's heavy for you and that might be too heavy for me, right? So heavy means that you are at the end of your set. So let's say it's 10 reps. At rep 10, if I said to you, I want you to do another one, you would be like, maybe. Like I could maybe do another one, right? So you're getting close to fatigue with the set, meaning that you can't do it anymore, and in a range of motion that you can own. What do I mean by that? I used to always say, if it's not full range of motion, it's not a rep. However, I understand that many of us grew up in the cardio section of the gym, right? We all, sort of all were cardio bunnies. And now I'm asking you all to be muscle mommies. And now we don't necessarily have the range of motion in our hips, in our spine, in our knees, the ankle mobility, the shoulder mobility. So a range of motion that you can own right now, which means the range of motion that you can do that is pain-free. And then you work with time. Maybe it's a chiropractor, physical therapist, physio, whomever, who can help you expand that range of motion. So heavy range of motion is 1 or 2 reps from muscle. What was it? Failure? Did I hear someone say? In a range of motion that you can own. Yes. There was a quiz at the end. Did you guys know that? Okay. So week one, you're bleeding here. I love a rep range of 8 to 12 here. Okay. It's a moderate rep range. We're not quite all firing on all cylinders yet. We're still dealing with the cup or the tampon or whatever. 8 to 12 is wonderful and validated by the literature. We're going to talk about a lot of different kinds of rep ranges, but anything from 5 reps to 30 is going to build muscle. And that is your primary objective as a woman in her 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s is to build muscle. 8 to 12 in week 1. In terms of food in week 1, you're losing a lot of blood, right? We're losing blood. So I like to think about blood building foods. So red meat, as this lady is so passionately demonstrating, is a great option. Certainly any kind of dark meat, right? Goat, lamb, chicken thighs. Chicken, if you're a white meat kind of gal, you're still going to get heme. You're still going to get some iron there, but the darker the meat, the higher the iron content. If you are a vegetarian, beans, like kidney beans, lentils, this is a great option for you as well. Tofu and tempeh are also great options as well. The other thing that happens for women in week 1 is our hunger hormones drop. So you may have felt ravenous the week before you get your period, but here your hunger drops. So if you are someone who likes to fast, or you like to, if you're trying to lose a little bit of weight, a caloric, you can restrict your calories a little bit here, and your body is much more tolerant to that kind of stress, because these are all stressors, right? Fasting is a stressor. Caloric restriction is a stressor. They're eustressors, right? When used appropriately. And you can certainly apply them here if you like. Like if you're someone who likes to restrict carbs, you can do that, or restrict fat, whatever it is. You will do well. You will not notice it as much in this week. My favorite week. Week 2. Always has been, always will be. So week 2 is when your period is done and you're entering into that proliferative phase. So this is, if you remember from the chart, that pink line, estrogen is peaking. She's reaching her height, and so is testosterone. So there's a lot of reasons why this week feels really great. We're essentially firing on all cylinders, right? So we have all of these growth hormones, all of these anabolic hormones are up and running. So your ability to recruit the motor unit in the muscle is augmented. Your recovery is going to be better. Your strength, your coordination is going to be great. So if you're trying a new program, if you're trying a new movement pattern, this is a great week to try it, right? You're going to, as I mentioned, recover better. And it's just a wonderful week to go all in. And when we talk about the difference between muscle growth, which I think is an important objective for all women, and strength, they're actually 2 different objectives, right? Strength and muscle growth are often correlated because women who have and men who have a lot of muscle often are strong, but they're actually separate and distinct outcomes. So in week 2, I actually like for you to optimize for strength. What does that mean? It means lifting heavy AF in a short and contracted rep set. So week 1, who remembers how many reps I was recommending? Yes, 8 to 12. Here we're going to do 5 to 7. So what does that mean? It's less reps. What does that mean to the weight? It goes up. Yeah. And what does heavy lifting mean again? 1 or 2 reps from muscle fatigue or failure in a range of motion that you can. Yay. Okay. So that's how I like to structure week 2. You're firing on all cylinders, like go for it. Go for your PBs, your personal bests, your PRs, your personal records. In terms of food, I typically like to jack up your protein here, right? You're going to need a bit more protein to help in that reparative process because you're essentially destroying the muscle fibers, which is the point of training. So you want to increase your protein here. I typically start at a recommendation of about 40% of your total calories. And then depending on your preference, if you really like to eat a lot of fat, you can, fill the fat in with the rest of the calories or high carb or some combination of the two. All right, just as a quick reminder, that is your follicular phase, right? So we had bleed or menstruation week, proliferative phase, and now hopefully we've ovulated, right? We've released the egg. Whether or not you want babies, your biology doesn't care. So now we are entering into the luteal phase, which is where a lot of women will often run into issues. And I think the next photo, if I may say so myself, really does capture what the luteal phase feels like for most women. Right? You're fatigued, right? You're a bit more bagged. You're feeling hot. Maybe you're feeling hot and bothered and you're not sleeping the same way that you are. You're not recovering in the same way that you were last week, right? It just feels like you're just not yourself. Some women can really feel this way. So I often like to joke that mood swings are the form of exercise that happens in the luteal phase, but there are other options for exercise as well. So when we're thinking about training in week 3, I actually like to return to that week 1 protocol, 8 to 12, right? 8 to 12. So 1 to 2 reps from muscle failure in a range of motion that you can own. Yes. So 8 to 12 here. In week 4, so that's also part of the luteal phase. If you are feeling particularly inflamed, I actually like to widen the rep set. So now we're doing 15 to 20, even 15 to 25. You could technically do 15 to 30, but that's a long set, like 30 reps. It's a long time to run through 30 times. So 15 to 20 is what I like. So that means that the weight is going to come down a little bit. The reason why I'm asking for more repetitions in week 4, without getting too geeky and going over time, because I know that there's a lady in the back that's going to hold up a sign soon, is every time you're contracting the muscle, you're releasing something called a myokine. It is a subset of the immune system. It's anti-inflammatory. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. It helps you feel better. If you're feeling particularly moody, emotional, sensitive, you're not sleeping well, your joints hurt, the more reps that you can kind of get in at the gym at a lighter weight is going to help combat that inflammatory response. Food in the luteal phase. How many of you have had a chocolate bar this size or wanted one? All right. So the luteal phase is often characterized by lots of cravings, right? So we are craving often chocolate. And I want, because we are literally growing an organ. Remember I was saying we literally grow an organ every single month for 35 or 40 years. There is a greater metabolic demand. There's a greater metabolic demand that's happening here, right? Your body is preferentially moving glucose, amino acids, free fatty acids, magnesium, which is very high, which is usually very high in chocolate, which is why a lot of us crave it. And then selenium and zinc and all the things. Your body is literally shoving that all into the endometrial lining. It's creating a 5-star hotel for the anticipation of a fertilized egg. Said another way, you're hungrier. Who feels hungrier in the second half? Who tracks? Yeah, a lot of you do, okay? And so what I like to do in terms of food in the luteal phase is I like to give you, and I don't have to give you this permission, you can give yourself permission to eat more, right? At least 10% more of your total calories, at least. I have been known to increase, when I've worked with private clients and whatnot, I've been known to also increase it up to 40%. but 10% at a minimum. So if you're having 2,000 calories over the course of the day, that's 200 calories. That's, what is that? 2 apples and some, almonds. It's not a ton, right? And I think I heard maybe a gasp or two when I said 40%, because I understand as a woman in society, we've often been told tiny, thin, petite, small, don't take up any space, don't be inconvenient, right? We're told always skinny, thin, less, right? I would love to invite you, and it may not feel right now, but just for you to marinate on this idea that perhaps you can be responding to your body in a way that she requires and she expects of you. Your body requires more food during this time, more substrate. If you don't give her more substrate, where's she going to take it from? Your muscles, your bones, all the places you want to keep. You want to keep your organs nice and juicy, right? Muscles, nice and thick, bones, dense. And so if I can inspire you in any way today or beyond, and if my work means anything, I would love to move from this idea of being skinny to being strong, right? From moving from catabolic and breaking down to anabolic and growth and expansion, right? No more restriction. We're going to resistance train. Yeah? Okay. Last thing I want to mention about the luteal phase is I mentioned it before, the exquisite emotional sensitivity that many of us can feel. Who cries at diapers commercials? Yeah, or nothing, right? Or no reason you're crying, right? You can't figure out what nail polish and you're crying, rocking in the corner. Again, society will often say, oh, it's that time again for Zora. It's that time, it's that time again for Sally. Right? It's oh, she must be PMSing or what. Yes, you are. But that beautiful sensitivity is your body's way of telling you maybe there's some residue. If you're getting annoyed at your boss or your partner, if your partner at a frequency of exactly every 4 weeks chews in a way that you hate, maybe there's a way, right? Maybe there's a way or something that you need to clear up with your husband for the next cycle in your life, right? Or maybe your children are getting on your nerves more than they should. Maybe there's something that has to happen, a conversation, an activity, a connection point with your children for the next cycle in your life. This exquisite sensitivity, your body is never wrong. And it's far more intelligent that we can, we have big brains and we can run through the algorithms and the logistics, but your body has a different way of communicating with you. When you are feeling sensitive, honor it. Yes? Yes. Okay. I like to think of beautiful men and beautiful women. Men are more like the sun, right? They're kind of like same every day, right? They repeat, the hormones come up, they come down, and then same the next day. Women do have diurnal rhythms. We have circadian rhythms as well, but we also have this lunar. We also, men are like the sun, women are like the moon. We have, and actually our menstrual cycle, I didn't mention this before, 29 and a half days is the average menstrual cycle. How long do you think the lunar phase is? 29 and a half days. Women are like the moon, right? So what we talked about today is in week 1, we talked about training in a moderate rep range, 8 to 12, 1 or 2 reps from failure in a range of motion that you can own, right? We're thinking about blood building foods. If you're thinking, so like the beef, the goat, the lamb, even salmon, things like that, or beans, lentils, if you're vegetarian. And then if you're someone who loves to fast, there's a great week here to push it, right? If you're someone who fasts for 12 hours or 14 hours, you might push it to 16, that kind of thing. In week 2, we're going for strength. It's a 5 to 7 rep range, and we're also increasing our protein. In week 3, we're coming back to that moderate rep range, 8 to 12, and then we're increasing all calories all month, for the next 2 weeks, 10% at least. And then in week 4, if you're feeling very inflamed, you can widen that set, 15 to 20. Right? To help with the myokine release and to help with that anti-inflammatory effect. It has been my absolute honor speaking with you today. if you would like these, my gift to you, for Tim for inviting me and for having your attention today, if you would like these slides with the notes. So actually, I'll also say that I had to trim this talk down a little bit to be able to fit in the time. But I have more slides and there's notes that accompany them. Just find me on Instagram, Dr. Stephanie Estima. DM me the word goddess because that's how I want you to menstruate. And I will send you these slides with these notes. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Thank you.